All right, you guys are live.
And now, John McLean, I can now hear you.
Yes, yes.
Much better.
All right, so, try to move it back. We're live, so we are ready to go. Mr. Capuzzi, if you'd like to open the meeting.
Welcome everyone this evening to the June 11th, 2020 meeting of the Haverford Township Planning Commission. Thank you for being here, and Kelly, could you please take roll?
Sure can. Mr. Capuzzi.
Present.
Mr. Reardon.
Here.
Mr. Poynton.
Here.
Mr. Shannon.
Here?
Ms. Dobbs.
Here.
Mr. Fioramundo.
Here.
And Mr. Garrett.
Here.
Great. I'd like everyone to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice
for all.
For all.
Great, thank you. The first item on this evening's agenda is a preliminary final minor subdivision plan for Sleepy Valley Holdings LLC. The property is located adjacent to 201 Greenbrier Lane. And the applicant proposes to subdivide an existing undeveloped parcel into two lots. The existing parcel contains a net lot area of 32,046 square feet. And we'll be creating a lot number one having 15,971 square feet and lot number two having 16,075 square feet. The property is zoned R5, which is low medium residential, and it's located in the first ward. And the developer is Mr. Spizzato, Vince Spizzato, and I believe Christopher Yan is here to present the plan for the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and give us a little description of the development.
Okay, good evening. I will try to share my screen now so you can see the plan while I'm talking. So this is the plan sheet. As you said, there's Sleepy Hollow owns two properties. This property on the left-hand side of the plan sheet is an existing lot with a house. And then in the center of the plan sheet is a vacant parcel that I'd like to subdivide into two new lots. They do meet the code requirements for lot area, minimum lot width. Will meet the other setback and impervious coverage requirements. We do have a review letter from Pennoni and Associates that I could go through those comments and how we will address those.
Sounds like a plan.
That'll be fine.
And this is the second sheet of the plan set. This shows more of the existing conditions. I realize it's probably hard to see because it's far away, but the lot does slope from, you can see the north arrow up in the corner here. So from the northern corner of the lot is basically the highest point, and it slopes away from the street down to the lower corner. You can see there are some steep slopes shown by a hatch area in the back of the lot. They're back here. But we go through the review letter. Item number one says the applicant should provide documentation of the median setback line for existing structures on the same side of the street. That's a will comply. We have done that calculation already. The required front yard setback is 30 feet, and we found that the median was 32, so we will meet that. Number two says an approved Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Sewage Facilities Planning Module exemption is required. The applicant has submitted the exemption request. We did also send that to DEP. They gave us the code number and said that we needed a full planning module exemption. The full planning module, not an exemption. We forwarded that to RHN as they're the next one down the list, and we got a certification, a Chapter 94 certification from them. And then we did just today forward it to Darby Creek Joint Authority for their letter. Basically, once we have all the Chapter 94 certifications, we'll come back to the township for the approval. Item number 3 says all storm drainage, sanitary sewer, and public water supply or facilities within 400 feet of the site shall be indicated or a waiver requested. For that one, we've received some of that information from Pennsylvania One Call or the township sewer map. So we can show the water lines and sewer. We could show an aerial and LiDAR topography. The one thing that's a little more difficult is the storm drainage. So we'd like to request a partial waiver of that, if that would be allowed. Number 4 says the applicant shall also submit plans and studies in accordance with Chapter 78. So there was a little confusion with that. I guess my misinterpretation when I read that code section, I read it as we needed to comply with Chapter 78. And since there's nothing proposed, that we do comply because we don't meet the minimum disturbance area, or we don't exceed the disturbance area to submit any plans. But I did have a conversation with Mr. Faulkner and Ms. Kirk. And so we did fully design the plans with new houses. We submitted those just about a week and a half ago. So I know that, it wasn't part of an official submission. Mr. Faulkner hasn't been able to fully review it yet, but we are in the process of complying with that comment. So we will do that. Number 5 says the plan shall indicate driveway locations. We do now have that on the plan, which I can show you that plan we submitted in June after we go through these. The minimum right-of-way width and carway width are 50 feet and 27 feet respectively. The applicant shall provide the minimum width or request a waiver. So we'd like to request a waiver of that. The existing cartway is about 25 feet. It is about 2 feet short, which to get to that 27, you should really increase 1 foot on either side. That doesn't seem necessary in this case, given that on either side of the street or either side of the property, it seems to be that consistent 25 feet. The right-of-way is 45 feet. If you would like to get, and that appears to be centered on the street as well, if you'd like to get to 50, we could add the extra 2.5 feet on this property. So I guess it would be a partial waiver asking of the street widening, but we could give you the right-of-way width to 50 feet. Number 7 says the area of questionable title shall be resolved and documentation of the resolution prior to final approval. And so that's a little area here.
18 square feet.
It's 18 square feet, that's right. That was on the survey plan, and we are working with the surveyor now to resolve that. So that's also will comply. I think that's an example of one of those where you get the deeds and you plot everything out and there was a little overlap. So surveyor's gonna figure that out and we'll get the answer. The next comment says the signature block for a township engineer should be revised to indicate were reviewed by a township engineer. That will comply. Number 9 says the applicant shall confirm the steep slopes have been delineated in accordance with the definition. And so I did talk to Mr. Faulkner today. We will do that. I think that I need to provide him a little more information to show that we have. Basically, we showed the slopes with every 2-foot contours, and then we highlighted on the newer plans the areas that had the 4 feet in a row to distinguish the difference between what would be regulated and not regulated. Number 10 says it would be prudent to address the walls across the western property line at this time. Those are these 2 walls over on this side in between the 201 property, the existing house. There's a little U wall, which we're going to remove. And there's another linear wall, downgrade of that crosses the property line. We're just going to remove a little bit of portion on the new lot. That way there's no retaining walls that cross property lines. And then number 11 says a note should be added to the plan indicating that the substandard curb and sidewalk is required to be replaced. We will add that plan or that note, so that's a will comply. Do you have any questions for those, or would you like me to show you the new plan we submitted on June 1st?
Can we stay with a couple of the things that you just reviewed?
Yes.
On those walls, they are retaining walls, correct?
If
Or
you
are they
look,
raised walls?
yeah, if you look at them, they're retaining almost nothing. This one, you can see the contour line go right through it, so that's a raised wall. This one here looks like it might hold back, 6 inches to a foot, but nothing that can't be graded out very easily.
Well, you're going to have to bring those into compliance because we have new regulations about how far out and how close you can put all of those things in today as far as retaining walls go, and that's all been modified in the last 6 to 8 months. So you're going to have to look at those. This is Chuck Reardon talking, and Angelo will have a lot better idea about that than I will. But that is a concern from my point of view, and it's the big one, and it's because it's involving that portion of the property that is actually not part of your subdivision, but it will have an impact on that property. And I would like just to know that it's in such a fashion that water is going to be able to drain properly the way it needs to drain through those areas because it's all interconnected. That's my big concern with your whole project.
Okay, I think we can easily address that if, like I had planned to cut the wall at the property line. If it needs to be cut back further than that, we could just remove the whole wall.
Okay.
We'll make sure that we comply with that code.
Thank you.
Let me see, Jack, you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I am interested in seeing the designs submitted and not reviewed with the planning commission that were submitted last week with the planned development of those two properties.
Okay. Maggie?
I do have a list of some comments that I wanted to make, but I think I'd like to wait to see what the newer submission looks like. I feel like maybe some of my questions might be answered. So if it's all right, I'd like to hold off on my comments until after we review the other drawing.
Okay, fine. David?
I feel the same way. I think it's best to hold off.
Rob?
I do have one question, and it may be a little irrelevant to the site, but where does all that water go at the bottom, at the lower end of the site? It's draining all down. Is there something down there that's picking up all the overflow of water?
Rob, down, this is Chuck Faulkner. Down a little further to the west, there is a low point in Greenbrier Lane there, and there's a swale and an intermittent stream, I guess you could say, that does drain that section and eventually gets down to Glendale Road and
Okay.
and the Darby Creek.
Okay, and I'm also curious to see how the sites are laid out with the residential pads on the site, in that the site is, both of the parcels are relatively narrow. I'm anxious to see how they're laid out also.
Okay. Jesse?
Yeah, agreed. I think I'd like to see the, let's see the new plan.
Okay,
Circle back.
all right. Chuck? Chuck Reardon?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Let's
Okay.
get on to the next step. Maybe I should have waited until then anyway. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just have a couple questions. Any waivers you request, you're supposed to request those waivers in writing. You're supposed to give us a reason why you're asking for the waiver. So when you respond to the township engineer's letter, make sure you put your reasoning down for asking for the waivers that you need. Okay? As far as the grading and the stormwater management and erosion control, have you done any infiltration tests on the property to test the soils for infiltration?
Not yet. We have them scheduled, but we don't have them, we don't have results yet.
Okay, so you can't say that you have a final grading design until you have that information, correct?
We have a grading plan. We don't have a final stormwater design yet.
Okay. And who did the survey? Is that your company that did that, or do you hire someone?
We don't do surveying in-house, so Mominy Inc. did it for this project.
Okay.
It's on the plan, Angelo.
Mominy's
Says it's
name
them.
on the plan?
It says that it's Monami on the actual plan. Just to let you know.
Okay. Chuck Faulkner, I have a question about, Chris Yon, are you also a professional land surveyor?
I am not.
Okay. I don't know that a registered professional engineer can seal subdivision plans anymore. I thought it had to be done by a registered surveyor. Chuck Faulkner, you know if that's true or not?
That's my understanding also, Angelo. Now, obviously Chris can co-seal it, but there should be a registered land surveyor that does seal it.
Okay. I'm hoping, Chris, that you can get Mominy to take care of that for you, if that's the case.
Yes, I've done that before with Mominy and another surveyor where I sign for the engineering part and they sign for the surveying part.
Right, okay. All right, so based upon the feelings of the planning commission, it looks like we would like to have a chance to review that additional information that you provided to Pinoni's last week. We'd like a chance to take a look at it. I'd also like to have you, oh, there it is right there, okay. But more importantly is we want to make sure that, you have adequate capability on the property to put in infiltration basins, especially given the fact that the water drains towards other properties. So I think, in my opinion anyhow, it'd be best that we not take any action on this plan until we're comfortable that we have a stormwater system that's, we know, have some confidence in that will work.
Okay, so this is the plan. This is what we call the illustrative site plan. So the new set with additional information is a 7-page plan set. And so this is the illustrative site plan. You can see there's basically a square type house. It pushed up to the front of the setback to basically comply with the conforming setbacks along the street. We have front-loaded 2-car garage, both located on the high side of the lot. They neck down so that their opening at the street is only 12 feet wide. So this is the overview plan, the illustrative site plan. Here's the vicinity plan, which shows those other houses and how they are close to the street as well. They pretty closely line up with that setback line. And then this is the grading plan. It grades fairly easily without any walls. And so we basically created a high point on the upper part of each lot where we have a swale down the side. And so on this lot, lot 2, we have a swale that pushes water down the side on the high side to the backyard. The front yard just pushes from the driveway side to the other side to a drain. And the rest of it goes in between the 2 houses to the rear yard, and lot 1 is graded similarly. What we have are some rainwater conductors, and between the drain and the rainwater conductors on both lots, we pipe them to an approximate size and location of an underground stormwater management system. Each of those there would be an overflow of a level spreader, which we locate a little further down on the lot. And I think to answer one of those other questions is the water will flow down along the back of the lot or to the rear of the lot. And then there is a swale along the low side of both this new lot 1 and also the existing 201, which the applicant also owns. And so it will go into that swale, depressed area, which you can see in this lower corner is at least 3 feet deep, rather than going right onto the neighbor's property. It gets in that natural depression.
Okay, looking at that grading plan, it looks like you're gonna probably have to take out at least half a dozen pretty large trees in order to accommodate the construction. And the
Yes.
township does have requirements to replace trees that are removed, so, and normally the landscaping associated with those replacements is reviewed by the Shade Tree Commission. So that's another hoop you're gonna have to jump through as far as getting a final approval for these plans. We have to see what you're proposing as far as replacement trees, and the Shade Tree Commission has to sign off on that plan.
Okay, for now, we've done the calculation on what will be removed, and here's the list. It has the total diameter and the replacement that would be required. What we haven't done yet is we had an arborist go out to the site. We know there are some trees that are dead or dangerous that he noted, but we don't have an official report from him yet so that I can identify which those are. But
Okay.
we will keep going with that.
Do you have any idea from a time frame standpoint when construction might occur on these lots?
I would assume that that would happen as soon as we get approval to do so, but I believe Vince Spizzato is on the call. Maybe he could answer that a little better.
And you applied for,
Angelo?
yes,
Hi, it's Vince Spizzato here.
okay.
The question is to be determined, Angelo, in light of how things are. So I don't have an immediate answer for you. Of course, we want to start them as soon as possible, usually. But, really all depends on the market factors and stuff like that.
And you're gonna have to wait for the sewage approval anyhow.
Yeah, well, right. We have to wait for one of the lots, correct?
And you did apply for 2 EDUs, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And Vince, you're rebuilding basically the house at 201?
Yes.
Okay.
Renovating it, Angelo.
Half the roof was missing yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyhow, I guess, like I said, our opinion is you come back, address the comments the best you can, give us a chance to review the grading plan and try to get a little more definitive answer on the stormwater management system. And then we'll act on it probably next time you come back with all those information, okay?
Sure.
okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Wait, there was no public comment on this, was there?
I have 4 emails of public comment. 2 were from the same resident, but we'll start with those. The first comment was from Larry Gentili, the next door neighbor of the property and previously township manager of Haverford Township. He writes, please accept this email as my full support for the development. I've had the opportunity to review the subdivision plan along with the stormwater management, and I'm 100% confident that Mr. Spizzato will build excellent homes that will be an asset to our community. As you are aware, I have had the pleasure of working with Vince as my prior position with Haverford, and his reputation and work is outstanding. I do have one serious concern that must be addressed immediately prior to any development, and that is the removal of 3 large dangerous trees. These trees have had prior issues and most recently fallen and have caused property damage at my home and a home on Glendale Road. I apologize, there actually were photos and I should have attached them and I did not, so I can follow up with those. These trees pose a safety concern to me and my neighbors, and they must be addressed before anyone is seriously injured. Again, thank you, and please feel free to call me, and I can answer any questions or provide full support of this development.
Where's Larry live?
Next door?
On Glendale?
No, on Greenbrier.
Greenbrier, okay.
He's the person with the 18 square foot problem.
Right.
That's right there on the corner of his property in the back. So
Okay,
he's next door to lot number 2.
okay.
The second email is from Sheila Muskamp. She's at 208 Glendale Road. Actually, this one came first. I'm writing to voice concern for development of the property located at 201 Greenbrier Lane. Our property at 208 Glendale is directly behind and downhill from 201 Greenbrier. We have lived here for more than 20 years. Currently, when a hard rain falls, our street fills with enough water to wash over the curb and flow down our driveway and across our property. During the first several years in our house, these flooding rains occurred only occasionally. In recent years, these events occur several times a year. It is our concern that with 2 additional houses on the property, which slopes from Greenbrier downhill to the rear of our property, we could see water like this from both the back and the front, causing property damage to our land and our structures. It is our understanding that a drainage system of some sort is proposed. We would like to offer our concern that it be adequate to hold back not just typical storm runoff, but also the amount of water that can be accumulated in these heavy rains. I, after that, had sent them the plans to review, which they had followed with a second email. Thank you for addressing my email from last week regarding the development of the property located at 201 Greenbrier Road. Shortly after I sent the email, we had several large sections of trees that are on the property at 201 Greenbrier fall in our garage. During that storm, we also experienced one of the flooding incidents on Glendale that I had addressed in my previous note to you. We would like the issues of the tree maintenance as well as our concerns about the rainwater runoff addressed at the next meeting. Thank you for your time and consideration. And then we had one last email from Julie Orlando at 708 Howard Avenue, saying, we live at 708 Howard Avenue, Havertown, PA 19083, and we oppose the building proposal adjacent to 201 Greenbrier Lane. Thank you. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, unless anybody else has anything, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you, Vince and Chris, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the land development conceptual plan discussion for Blue Devil Realty LLC, 57 South Eagle Road. The applicant proposes to raise the existing building, which is a funeral parlor, and redevelop the 51,800 square foot property with a 3-story, 27,000 square foot self-storage facility. The application is pending before the zoning hearing board for relief from the provisions of the zoning code to allow a self-storage facility in the C3 district, to allow a 52.1% building coverage where a maximum of 25% building coverage is permitted, and to provide for 11 off-street parking spaces where 52 are required. The hearing date with the zoning board has not been scheduled at this time. The property is zoned C3 General Commercial and is located in the 2nd Ward. I believe Mr. John McBlain is here to present the plan. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the commission for meeting with us electronically. Certainly different, new to all of us. So please bear with us as we go through. I do have, just to give you a sort of preview, what we'd like to do is the other participants, along with myself, on behalf of the project, are the 2 principals of Blue Devil Realty, Mr. Greg Lingo and Mr. Sean Knapp, who are both online with us here. And our engineer is Mr. Rob Lambert, who's online with us here. So I want to give you just a preview of what we want to do, and then have Mr. Lambert go through some of the technical and engineering aspects of the plan, and then have Mr. Lingo and Mr. Knapp join in and talk about the operation and some of the other issues that surround the self-storage. Mr. Lambert has some slides for us, so he'll put up there from his share from his screen when we get to that point. In terms of just the overview of the project, as Mr. Capuzzi described, The current use is for a funeral home, and it's the Logan Funeral Home has been a part of Haverford and Havertown for many years. This property has been used as a funeral home property, I believe even before Logan, going back, pretty much as far as can be remembered. As many know, the funeral home industry is changing. It's in the process of changing even more now after the COVID-19, but even prior to that, funeral homes had consolidated. The same type of funeral services are not taking place with cremations, and many times families choosing to have burials all within one day. So as a result of that, the Logan family has made the decision, and Mr. Logan indicated to me that the sale of this property is part of Logan's strategic business plan for their funeral home business to better serve the Delaware County community. And while the Logan Funeral Home will be operating at this location until plans for the redevelopment of the property and the relocation of the funeral home business are finalized, the current use of the property will eventually come to an end, and it will not be coming back. So with that context, and we know that, with this application, certainly the biggest hurdle is that change in people's minds from what has been a well-loved local business in terms of the Logan Funeral Home to a different type of use that we're proposing. So as your materials have indicated, we're proposing to construct a footprint building of 27,000 square feet for indoor climate-controlled modern self-storage units. You'll see later in the presentation, I think the materials presented to you have a rendering of what we propose the building to look like. And as I went out and actually drove and looked around, one building that struck me that was similar to our rendering is actually the new Haverford Township building. We believe that the self-storage use will complement the adjacent retail area and effectively create a mixed-use development area. The C3 General Commercial District, the specific intent as outlined in the zoning ordinance is to provide for the appropriate development of the township's main and general business district, which are designed to offer township-wide and regional services. And obviously, this is not a use permitted by right, but we think that the use as proposed perfectly fits in with that specific intent for the C3 commercial district, and also will buttress and support the retail businesses that are in that area. Many of you are planners and professionals in this industry, and you may know from planning perspective, there's strong growth and recommendation for the inclusion of self-storage use as a mixed use with retail in new construction, and for self-storage as an infill development for difficult to repurpose structures. We see a lot of that with buildings now like Kmart's and JCPenney's in existing retail locations. The self-storage industry is a growing need, and not just in urban areas, but in suburban areas like ours. One of the largest segments of growth is the baby boomer population looking to downsize. And also there's a growing need amongst those residents who live in our apartments. As I said, I think that the proposed use will complement the retail uses around Eagle Road and Westchester Pike without adding impacts that many other of the by right uses would be able to add. With that, I would now turn to Mr. Lambert, and I know he's got a screen that he can share with us. Some presentation. Rob, why don't we skip through and I know we've got a couple of slides that show the general location. I'm sure most people are familiar with where the property is.
Yep. Let me, sorry, I got mute. I'm just going to flip through a few slides. I'm going to go fairly quickly because some are just pictures and orientation, which I know you're all familiar with. So this is the location of the site highlighted in yellow. Westchester Pike goes left to right across the top of the page. Eagle Road goes to the left of the property from the top to the bottom. And then I'm just going to flip through a few pictures. This is the existing Logan Funeral Home, a side view. This is a memorial that will be preserved as part of this project. It's out on Eagle Road. This is the adjacent strip center along Eagle Road. So this parking lot, the funeral home is just off to the right of this image. Again, another picture of the strip center, highlighting that there are some vacancies within that strip center that it currently exists there for the retail. Again, highlighting that there's vacancies. This is the Logan Funeral Home on the left. Looking out, you can see the apartments across the street. Again, looking back, this is behind the property looking north. The apartments that are joining to the rear of that same parking lot. So that's a little bit separated from the site itself. It's through the parking lot, but you can see, in between this site and the parking lot and the apartments is this parking lot. You can see again across the rear of the property where there's some storage of vehicles, larger vehicles. In the same picture, a little zoomed in. Immediately adjacent to the property, they're storing some trailers. And then the industrial building to the south on Eagle Road. This is across the street, the apartments. Closer look at the apartments. This is just to the south of the site, the Mobile Health Solutions building. Just another picture of that further down. The retail stores along South Eagle Road, just showing the signage and the context. The firehouse, which is just, it's a couple of properties south of the subject property. This is a copy of the zoning map, so you can see where Westchester Pike, Eagle Road. Again, I highlighted the property in yellow just to put it in context. I looked at the overall zoning map of Haverford, and what occurred to me is most of the C3 is along the more heavily traveled, so Westchester Pike, the 4-lane roads, and down on Route 1, there's a little section, and then really up in the center of Haverford by the former where the township building was, in that area where you had a comprehensive plan done to talk about the retail, there's some C3 in there, but this C3 along South Eagle Road floats a little bit by itself. It has a lot of the residential uses around it. And then the next two slides are really just the C3 and talking about what uses are permitted in the C3 to give a context of what we're asking for. So a takeout restaurant, and by special exception, you can actually have a drive-through. So you could have a fast food, a Taco Bell, Long John Silver, McDonald's, other fast food uses in this area. Going through lots of different food uses, you can do a medical clinic type of use would be permitted. You can see U was the fast food use. So there's a lot of uses that have a lot more impact to the surrounding properties and community than the proposed use. So this was just the Google Street View. You can see the memorial on the right-hand side, the Logan Funeral Home to the center, the strip center that we talked about, and the apartments are off to the left. And so then this is a architect's rendering of what the building would look like. So again, maintaining the memorial and then building a 3-story, 27,000 square foot building for the use. You clean up all the landscaping, have one entrance and exit. One major advantage of this use is it's a relatively high rateable with very low impact. That it does not have high traffic counts. It does not have a high parking demand. People are usually in and out going to their storage and accessing it frequently.
So Rob, can you describe for us, before we go on to the relief that we requested, in terms of the dimensional requirements in the C3 zoning district, we meet all the proposed building would meet all the dimensional requirements, but for the maximum building coverage. Is that right?
That is correct. We would meet all the setbacks. There's some existing nonconformities, or I suspect there's existing nonconformities, looking at the tax maps for some of the setbacks, but the building would conform with all the setback requirements. It would conform with the building height requirement. It is actually less than the permitted impervious coverage. 75% is permitted in this district, and we're closer to 65%. What we don't meet is building area. And one of the reasons why we don't meet the building area is simply because of the use doesn't require the extensive parking that some of the other uses would. So some of the other uses permitted in C3 are really pushing toward a smaller building so you can allow for a much greater, 50% of your lot can be parking. And we simply don't need that for this type of use. So we're asking to have a larger building footprint. And as a result, we also have lower parking. The code really doesn't address this type of use when it comes to parking. There's two different ways to look at it: is gross floor area and or the lot area. The lot area was 52,000. The floor area is actually a little bit more than that, so we're going to be higher than that required. But from looking at the studies and how much demand this would have, we were proposing 11 parking spaces. We could easily add more parking if it were required, but we did not want to pave an additional part of the site. So we were trying to keep the impervious lower, so we're at the 65% where 75% is permitted. But we were proposing, fewer parking spaces because we believe that they're not needed to simply pave that additional area.
And so you've shown here with the three variances that we're asking for: the use variance, the building coverage, and the parking spaces. So you've talked about all those. We have when you talk about the parking and the traffic volume, have we had anybody take a look at what the requirement would be for, or I'm sorry, not the requirement, but what the traffic trips would be for this type of property?
We did. We've reviewed that with traffic plan design. They're still studying some of it. The numbers that they had, though, were, again, much lower than any of the comparable uses that you would be able to have here, on a by right C3 use.
And I think, Ms. Kirk, I think I had sent over a copy of the traffic planning design trip generation report.
Yeah.
So that they're available for the members. All right. I think that's what I had from Mr. Lambert. I don't know if there's any questions for him at this time. Then what I would do is...
Can I ask, this is Chuck Reardon, can I ask one question? What is the square footage of the footprint of the actual building? Not the number of square feet going up, but what is the building footprint?
The building
footprint itself is 27,000 square feet, or is it what?
The footprint is 27,000 square feet.
And you're doing 3 stories, so you're putting 81,000 square feet of coverage minus some other stuff. Am I correct then?
Correct.
All right. Just wanted to clarify that because I'm looking at it and it certainly looked like it was 27,000 square feet. And I understand what you're talking about, 75% coverage, but you're talking 52.1%, I believe, coverage for the building, where in C3 we're allowed to have 25%. Am I correct in that regard too?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks. I just wanted to make certain I was on the right page here. Okay, I do understand about, because we did deal with Mr. Storage, that there are many less number of spaces necessary because of the way the buildings work. If you use this sort of use for a building, there is a difference, and I do understand that. And so I know reduction of numbers of spaces would be something, should this be an allowed use, I think is quite reasonable. I am concerned that the coverage is handling 80,000 approximately square feet of space, and how many and how many times you're going to have people coming in and out, and the numbers and that sort of thing, and whether or not, because I have a copy right here of Traffic Planning and Design Inc.'s report to Mr. Lingo dated June 3rd. So that's the one that you're referring to, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, well, that's the first. Those are just questions that are real concerns for me personally, and I need, and I'm sure, once again, I opened up my mouth and stuck it in first, so we'll see. Okay.
Really, along the same lines as the parking and square foot question, the variance says that you're requesting 11 spaces instead of 52. But if the entire gross floor area is in the 80,000 range, it should be closer to 81 parking spaces. Could someone clarify that?
Yeah, I believe that because there's no specification in, I believe, Article 7 for the off-street parking for this type of use, we fall into that catch-all. So it's the maximum square footage of the lot, or the gross square footage.
Whichever is greater.
Whichever's greater, yes. So
I think you're right. I think it would be the 81 would be required under the code. But
okay. So we might want to amend.
Understand that we don't think the code really addresses this type of use.
Right, but what you're asking relief from does say whichever is greater. So you may want to consider amending your zoning hearing board application.
Okay. With that, I would turn to Mr. Lingo and Mr. Knapp, and they can talk a little bit about the background of the project and their interest in it, and what outreach they've done, and how we came to be here.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is Greg Lingo. I am a Delaware County resident my entire life, as well as my partner Sean Knapp. We want to saying that take the concern of the neighborhood seriously. Prior to this meeting, we canvassed and surveyed most of the surrounding neighborhood, and we found many folks that signed petitions in support of the project. And ultimately, if we develop this project, we want you to know that our intent is to be a good neighbor. We, prior to any zoning hearing board meeting, we would like to conduct a community meeting to discuss our plans further, because we think that an informed public will not be scared and resisting change, and in fact support this use. We see this use as C3 zoning here in this location is tough for this location to be successful. Don't really know that this property, because it's off of the Westchester Pike thoroughfare, other than something like a dollar store, I can't really picture what permitted use would not fail there. It was interesting when we were pulling up the Google map had images of vacant stores next door, and that map was over a year old, so there still is vacancy there. With R8 and R6 zoning next to the property, as Mr. McBlain mentioned, we feel that this self-storage use complements and in fact buttresses those adjacent uses. The need for this for this type of building is certainly there, but the benefits are what I really want to focus on. It's a low impact business we talked about, does not require traffic mitigation, police, fire, rescue support, does not put a strain on the schools, it does not put a strain on utilities or other services, sewer, that type of stuff. And all the while, it significantly produces tax revenue. I believe when we checked Mr. Storage building, I understand that they pay a little over $80,000 per year. And I believe the current Logan use is under $20,000. So a quadrupling of that with low impact. And at the same time, you know, gone are the days where public storage is just a block of orange garage doors. You're not going to see a garage door in this design. We're going to create a great streetscape and entrance and facade, and we would work with the neighbors on that. Sean, do you want to touch on a little bit kind of the usage? Because I did hear the question about, you know, how often people, you know, when can they access the place and what would our hour, that type of stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Commission. Sure. So in terms of access to the building, it'll be staffed from 9 to 5:30, Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays, I believe the hours are 10 to 4, and then on Sundays it's 10 to 3, and then there's self with a key fob service, of course, from 7 in the morning till 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, 7 to 7 on Saturday, and then Sunday 9 to 5, I believe, is the model. In terms of usage, you know, what we're looking at again, and Mr. Reardon, I'm glad that you're familiar with the Mr. Storage model, of course. In terms of parking, we won't even be able to utilize 11 parking spaces. That's probably 4 or 5 parking spots too much, to be honest with you. We are talking about a low impact building, very safe, very secure. Again, I can't stress enough. It's not your warehouse self-storage type model. This is more a place where people are keeping their things, they're keeping their valuables. This is, you know, this will have a large humidor storage for cigars. We'll also have humidity control for wine and you know, other beverages as far as that goes. So top of the line in terms of everything, security, green building situations, and you know, everything like that. I just think there's, I'm glad this board is familiar with it, but there's just so many popular misconceptions about storage itself.
What kind of questions can we answer?
What is the plan for lighting? And what are the hours that the lights will be on?
Sure. So I can answer that. So in terms of the lighting will shut off at 9 o'clock, and then there'll be motions with the radius. They'll be pointed down.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to. I wasn't able to hear you.
Yeah, my apologies. So the lighting themselves will be extremely efficient. There'll be the LEDs. I wish we had our architecture. I don't have the cut sheet specifically, but that's something I can get over to you as well. And they'll be on until 9 o'clock, from dusk until 9 o'clock, and then they go off. And then if there's a security issue or motion detected on the side of that building, I believe it's facing almost like south, so more towards the memorial, motion lights will go off as well from a detector standpoint. And then in the back, same thing between the shopping center and the buffer area where we saw the picture before with those trucks and trailers stored.
I'll let each member have a shot at asking questions. Jack, if you want to start.
Yeah, first I want to thank you for shedding some light on the neighborhood outreach, because I appreciate that. I was planning on asking what sort of market research that you've done to position this facility, because we are aware that up Eagle Road across from the YMCA, we have this existing large storage facility. So among other things, and I'd like to ask that question and ask you to answer before I go on, because I may not have to ask some of these other questions. So is there a market research that you've done aside from canvassing neighbors?
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, thanks for asking that question. So in terms of a national average, they're calling for about 7 square feet per person in a community. Currently, Haverford Town is less than 2 square feet. And I believe the study actually called for indoor type storage situation. So Mr. Storage currently gives this community indoor storage, it's climate controlled and so forth. I understand they're expanding. It's also, there's oftentimes they're 100% occupied. You know, there's waiting lists over at Mr. Storage, which, you know, I understand, again, they are expanding just for that reason itself. So what that means is people are traveling further, you know, and it's okay for, you know, maybe me to, you know, go down to Darby and go store my stuff, but, you know, sometimes I'm not comfortable, or I wouldn't be comfortable with my daughter or my wife sometimes making this travel, and, you know, for different reasons. But, and also, we're about 23% higher on average storage price than, for instance, a Clifton Heights, and that has a lot to do with supply and demand. So we're paying more for storage as well.
How many units will be in this building?
Great question. So there'll be a mix of units. That hasn't been dictated yet. What they'll do is they'll put a multiplier. We'll be using a third-party provider. We have it narrowed down to an extra space or a cube smart, and they'll be looking at that based on the square footage allowed, of course, and breaking it down in increments of 30 by 10 units, 20 by 10 units, 10 by 10 units, 10 by 7s, 5 by 7s, and so forth.
And those units are things that we can morph and change as the market demands. So if we're seeing a run on a specific size unit, we can adapt within the building.
And CubeSmart is local. Is there any indication of desire for additional facilities of this type in the Haverford Township Comprehensive Plan? And I guess this is partially a question for you and also partially a question for other members of the Planning Commission, because I haven't seen that. I don't know what's happening in the comprehensive plan that's in the works right now. I know there's a big update for that. And I would assume that we are looking at this C3 development area and the vacancies there and reevaluating whether this is, whether that's the same zoning that should remain there or if that should be modified. And would a storage unit fall into the plan for that space rather than the existing condition, even though it doesn't necessarily qualify for the current zoning?
Jack, I'm sorry, this is the first I'm hearing of a comprehensive plan, but I would love to hear about a comprehensive plan.
Actually, I'll answer that. We were full swing with the comprehensive plan until the past few months. We had a public meeting scheduled with like a hands-on kind of forum type of thing to see what people wanted in different places. We didn't make it as far as identifying, you know, very specific areas and any zoning changes. That said, I find it highly unlikely that a change would be proposed to include a storage facility within the C3 zoning district as a use by right. It's not something that's been discussed, and I don't see that necessarily being something that would be wanted by the community within the zone, as a use by right.
Mr. Garrett, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't presume to speak for the Planning Commission members, but I will note that, you know, as I became involved in this and looked at the requirements under the zoning ordinance, the only area that I recollect that this type of use would be permitted by use is the light industrial area. And really, when you take a look at the zoning ordinance, it doesn't really describe indoor climate controlled self-storage. It lumps kind of indoor storage in with many warehousing. And The zoning ordinance itself doesn't really have any other standards. The parking is one of the examples of that, where you have a larger facility like this indoor storage that has a very low traffic requirement. There's not a separated out traffic requirement for it. So, as Mr. Lingo had indicated, sort of not that distant in the past, the idea of self-storage was, an outdoor market of, white metal corrugated buildings with orange doors. That's what a lot of people still have in mind when they think of self-storage. And, the market, as you can see, has evolved, first to the indoor self-storage to make it more aesthetically pleasing. And also what customers wanted, that they wanted to be inside and have that climate control. To even more of an involvement, even as you see from the Mr. Storage design, which is much nicer than, those old orange door garages, to a design like you have here, where you won't see garages, you won't see orange doors, at all through there. So, like I said, I don't live in Haverford Township to make a recommendation that way, but I do think that this type of use, the Cube Smarts, the Mr. Storages, the extra space type storage, that we do see being put into town centers, mixed use retail as an anchor, is something that's different if you take a look at what the requirements under the Haverford zoning ordinance is now.
I want to thank you for bringing up the mixed use and how these facilities can be found in mixed use developments, because that was actually my next question is, have you considered making this a mixed use development to accommodate not only C3 zoning services, but also this light industrial type of zoning, because that might be more compliant with your zoning, with the zoning requirements that are in place right now, and provide an updated space that might be refreshed for the C3 services that were originally planned for this area of the township.
Well, Jack, I think I can answer. That's something we definitely consider if that's something that's on the table, and if we can if that's a part of a comprehensive plan as well. I mean, I don't know if I can agree to it now, but if that's something that is an option, yeah, we're absolutely flexible.
Thank you. Then I guess there's only one other quick thing, and this is much, I think maybe a little bit simpler. I'm looking at the rendering that's still being shared, and it looks great. But when I compare it to the pictures of the funeral home that's there right now, I see a lot of overhead utilities, and I also see some older trees. So I see that there's a lot of new trees here, and that's great. So I assume that you're planning on replacing the trees that would be removed. Will you also be planning on undergrounding the utilities to this facility?
We are absolutely going to replace the trees, and we plan on working wherever we can, but working with PICO to do underground facilities if possible. They're going to allow it necessarily, but that's our intent.
And just to point out the rendering, I'll flip back and forth between the two pages here. So if you see the funeral home, they have above ground service here, but all the poles are actually on the other side. And if you look at this location, again, the poles are still shown, but we would be doing an underground service to the building.
You'd absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jack. Maggie?
Good evening. So thanks for your presentation. Just wanted to echo, I guess, the feedback on the rendering. It's certainly a more attractive building than some other storage facilities. I'm generally, though, hesitant to support applications that come in for use variances without a significant hardship being shown in terms of ability to use this building for other purposes. I think the extension of the district kind of down off of Westchester Pike, to me, it indicates that it serves as a transitional zone between the main commercial district and the adjacent residential uses. So, my intent of serving on the planning commission is to support building a strong community, and a strong community to me really means supporting walkable, vibrant communities that provide valuable destinations to residents. And while I definitely recognize that the need for storage facilities in America today vastly exceeds what anybody reasonably needs, the demand is definitely there. So in terms of a use, it is definitely, I think, something that we would see utilized. However, I don't really see this as a destination point for the community, for the surrounding community, I should say. So I just in general don't necessarily support a use variance without, again, any kind of extreme hardship being shown as to why you wouldn't be able to develop this property for uses that are currently allowed by the zoning. However, as I'm not the one to make that decision, but merely provide feedback, the rendering that you show, like I said, looks nice. It's a little boxy compared to some of the more residential style features that we see on the existing funeral home, and even some of the features that we see on the adjacent commercial strip shopping center, with the use of awnings and other articulations on the building's facade. So that could be something maybe that could add a little bit more of that transition as we're looking at this rendering. So again, if this were to be constructed in a similar manner as how you have presented here, I think some additional architectural features like facades facing the roadway. So I see you have the overhang in terms of the main front entrance on the side of the building, but something other than a flat facade could be nice. And I would absolutely support something more of a mixed use building here. So, if it were a use variance, but we had some more activated ground floor retail, restaurant, cafe, office facility, office use or something like that, that could be something as well to consider pending market. But definitely the street trees are necessary to provide that nice walkable streetscape. And I do wonder if the existing monument areas to be retained, if that could be an enhanced feature. So currently we have no seating, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of other vegetation around it. So I'm wondering if to enhance this area to make it more of a community destination point, if we could turn this into something like a parklet. So I would recommend, if there's additional features that you could add to that monument area to make it a place where people could come, even if nobody's actively walking to a storage facility, because you definitely can't carry a couch on your shoulder. But if you can, if you want to walk to this area, you could make it more of a walkable destination point that people would actively seek out if this were to be some kind of a parklet feature. And seating and shade would definitely be something that I would recommend considering for inclusion to enhance that space as a parks and recreation area. There is a question that I had about the actual parking. I do support the reduction in the parking that you're proposing. I know that these facilities don't generate a lot of traffic, but my concern though is that the parking lot doesn't have a huge turnaround area, and it's set up right now just for passenger vehicles. So I have used storage facilities in my past, but I drove to them in a U-Haul, not in a passenger car. So my concern is the layout. I would like to see truck turning templates to see how somebody, who's in a 24-foot U-Haul could pull into the site, unload, turn around, and leave without backing out onto the street. So that's a concern that I have just with vehicular circulation. Otherwise, just looking at my notes, I did also have a question about the overhead utilities. So you said you were going to bury them, so that would be something we would look for. But that's the bulk of my recommendation. So I would prefer a use that's already permitted by right. Mixed use in general would be something that would provide a better community destination. But again, if we're going to be seeing this as a use variance, then my main concern is to just take a look at enhancing that facade a little bit more to serve as a better transitional element between the community, the residential community, and the commercial community, and then enhance that park area for greater use of community residents.
This is great. This is great constructive feedback. I really appreciate it. It's Greg talking here. The monument, making that more of a parklet, like you said, is great. You know, in the current situation, the property isn't really used as a destination. But I really like the idea of perhaps a portion of this first floor on the street side, maybe being a coffee shop or something like that. We could build that into this building, and we could certainly enhance the landscaping and the monument area to make it more of an area where people, you know, you get your cup of coffee and you can walk down and sit there kind of at the monument area. We'd be wide open to something like that. And we want the architecture to fit in area. We spent a lot of time really looking at, we're bringing this into an area where it's a transition between commercial, apartments, the firehouse, and the Minoa School. And we wanted to kind of give pieces so that our architecture speaks to each of those pieces of architecture, but we're completely open to tweaking that. And I think that would be, in this planning process, something that we'd like to work through. I don't know that this should be C3 area in terms of the hardship. I think the hardship is all around us right there with C3. Gone are a lot of these, you know, these little centers haven't been successful, and you know, offices, and you know, I think we're seeing a changing time where less people are going to be reporting to the office. But I really like the idea of enhancing the monument area, maybe a little bit of a mixed use on our first floor here where we do have some room. We'll definitely work with Rob Lambert, our engineer, to make sure that there's proper turning radiuses and geometry works for the use that we have. But thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, thank you again. I mean, I have synapses firing. You know, I love the idea of a little playground, sitting area type of thing in that corner right there, underneath the shades with the monument, and yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
To piggyback off of the park area, you are required to have to provide 25% open dedicated open space for a land development project in the C3 zoning district. You may want to use that area and as part of that incorporation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, Rob?
Just a question about the overall height of the building that's being proposed. What's the maximum height that's there on that building right now that you're planning to do?
I believe 35 feet.
35 feet. And was
Well,
there...
less than 45 feet.
I'm sorry?
The maximum permitted is 45 feet. I know we're less than that. It's three stories or 45 feet.
Okay. And I'm sure that there was some cost effectiveness as far as going 3 stories to make it viable.
Yeah, we wanted to limit the land impact as well, rather than having it sprawl further.
Okay. Because I like the idea of things that were already discussed with Maggie as far as making it kind of a semi-commercial storage facility, in that maybe a lower level could be looked at a little more on the commercial end, and an upper level to be the storage area. And then I also had that same concern with being familiar with these storage facilities, and that you do use a U-Haul truck, and there's very little accommodations that I saw in that plan that would do that. And the other big issue that I had was, what kind of signage are you going to have on that building that says this is a place as a storage facility?
Sean, you want to talk to the signage, and then maybe Rob Lambert, you can talk a little bit about how you do the geometry on the truck maneuvering.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, haven't given the signage super amount of consideration. Of course, it'll be whatever is permitted and tasteful and all that, because we want to be sensitive to that area as well. So again, to be determined. The third-party vendors have different, fonts and lights and stuff like that. But that's something we can work on with the neighbors and this committee to kind of develop that as well.
Yeah, the reason why I bring it up is because it helps to make it look less obtrusive, and that the signage screams at you. And if it's done tastefully, I think it would be more acceptable.
Yep. I couldn't agree more, and that I appreciate you bringing that to light. I mean, that's something, and I know they're doing these in town centers and stuff like that. I'll do some more research, and honestly, I apologize because that's something I probably could have brought to this group here, but I'll separately send that as well.
Just to butt in once again, the maximum size of all signage in the C3 is 35 square feet. So with such a large building, just want to be mindful of that.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as the truck turning templates, one good thing is we do have a kind of low parking demand from a use, and then I think we have room, ability to be able to make sure we have a big enough area at the very end of that parking for the Ryder truck or the U-Haul truck to be able to pull in and do those, and we'll run all those turning templates when we get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, David.
Well, I already asked my question about lighting.
Okay.
I wanted to follow that with a question about whether the interior lighting would remain on beyond the hours or whether the building itself would be dark. I just want to mainly second a lot of the comments that have been made, both as to the mixed use possibilities, as to making the side area, the green, grassy area, even more treed, I would hope, and more, just generally more green and more shaded. I would also encourage you to discuss how the existing plan fits with the existing proposal fits with the comprehensive plan. I know it's hard to anticipate what the new comprehensive plan will be, but perhaps there's a way to factor that in. I think the signage is very important. If there is such a demand for storage, I think most people would know it's there and would be aware of it, and very few people would drive by and see a storage sign and say, "That's an idea I never thought of storage before. I'll have to get rid of that, my in-laws' furniture that I have in the house."
It's the storage is
Storage
a very local business, like on there. People aren't going to be driving from far away to come to this station.
But as to the use variance, when you just, I think you make a correct point that maybe this is a great idea and maybe it shouldn't be C3 zone, but that seems to me to be a legislative function and not our function to say, well, it's C3, but we think different uses should be permitted there, or it really shouldn't be C3. That's something that really would have to be addressed to the commissioners. And I haven't heard much about whether there's no possibility that this property could be developed in conformity with C3 zoning. So in that sense, I would also be reluctant for this body to say that we should have a use variance. But I think you've done a nice job with what you're proposing.
No, I appreciate that. And we came to this body first for exactly the reason the reasons that we're here tonight. We got some great feedback from you guys and things we're going to make to alter the plan and augment the plan and make it better. And that's why we keep you guys before zoning hearing board.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point too, Greg, I mean, I probably failed to mention, I'm less than a quarter mile from that location. I'm not going to be a part of putting something, I do, there probably is other C3 things that could be there, that are by right now. And as a neighbor, I wouldn't want them. I probably wouldn't want them, is what I'm thinking. Knowing as much as I do about retail and what goes where and who's going to go where. Back to Greg's point, I don't think we're going to get, suburban square type retailers at that location. And that's my concern with the retailers that like doing that.
And if I could, Mr. China makes a good point in regards to, one of the requirements being that you have to be able to show that, it's really not reasonable or practicable to be able to use it for something that it is zoned for. I think Mr. Lingo earlier on had mentioned that the types of uses for C3 for this size of a property, it is a large property, are going to lend themselves to uses that perhaps would be a lot more high impact to the community than this. The types of fast food or dollar store type of things where you need to make it big enough to use the property for practical and economic reasons. I also wanted to point out too, in terms of, we are asking for the use variance to be able to, and with the argument that this type of use is more of a general commercial use that specifically fits the intent of the general commercial use description in the zoning ordinance, rather than what it's established now as a light industrial. I did hear, again, there's been some public comment regarding the project, and somebody indicated that we were asking to turn this property into an industrial use or rezone it industrial, and that's not what we're doing at all. I think the members of the Planning Commission probably recognize that. We're not asking to change the zoning to industrial. We're not. We're saying that this type of commercial use fits better in C3. We do point out that, you saw some of the pictures before. There are some other uses right around there that are probably much more industrial than this. It seems like a very good company, but there's ones there where there's industrial buildings. One of the pictures had one of the smokestacks. When I was there, you could see something, what the discharge was, large trucks coming and going, and, with some types of facilities, multiple building facilities there next door for the medical use. So, when you look at what is right next door there, this is less of any sort of industrial use, and certainly more of a commercial use in line of what the C3 general commercial district is than some of the adjoining uses.
Okay, thank you, John. Chuck Reardon.
Yeah, I'm back. And
back.
I'm sorry I started off at the beginning, and just because I just wanted to make certain that we were understanding that the footprint and the other stuff, I have to tell you that I have lived in this community for about 70 years. And my family has owned a house in this community for 70 years. And the area that I've been in is Ward 5 over near Haverford Road and Haverford College. And I have watched organizations come in going up to along Haverford Road from where County Line and Haverford Road become kind of intertwined and Landover and that whole area, and coming back down into Ardmore. And that area of Haverford Township is called part of Haverford. But all along that road, we have put up office building after office building after office building because that's what we should be doing. And then what happens right now is every single time one of these office buildings starts to fail, we have to give something away so that somebody else gets to use it. So when you start changing the rules, and I'm not saying that I'm opposed to what you're talking about, but when you start changing the rules, every 20 to 25 years, all the rules change again. And every single time I look down there and I watch another bunch of doctors tear down 4 more homes and build another office complex, sell off another complex, but now we've got to have a different kind of organization in there because now we have to allow an area which was zoned for one thing becomes something else because they have a hardship. Well, they have a hardship because they came into our community, they ripped all the homes down, they did everything else, and then a number of years later, they come back and say, oh, gee, you know, we're building a new office building 4 doors up, and now we're not going to need the office building anymore, and it's a hardship. So, with that in mind, I'm going to point out 4 or 5 things to you, and I'm going to say that I'm not adverse to some sort of workout here, but by golly, I am not going to get pushed over by anybody ever when it comes down to changing the use of zoning. However, the most important thing, and the only reason I'm still on the planning commission, is because I've been around for so long now. I want to make certain that when we get the comprehensive plan rebuilt, we build it for the future, which also includes you gentlemen. Okay? Now, 3 or 4 things that I want to talk about. Now, that's the problem that I've had happen in my own community. So I want to let you know that if it happens in another community, I'll understand. Now, as far as changing out that area for around the monuments, that's a great idea. But Angelo Capuzzi will tell you, and we've been involved in so many things over the years, when you change out areas where children play, you can put in all kinds of things, but you never put in anything that's low where a child can't be seen from the street by the police. So whatever you decide to do in there, you need to do it if you're going to be involved so that the children walking back from Manoa school can be safe if they decide to go play in the play area. That's why we never put up solid fences and playgrounds. We always put up stuff where you can see through it. So as police officers and concerned and everyday citizens drive by, they can watch what's going on. So think about that in your process and just plug it into the back of your minds. The next thing is the Planning Commission in Haverford Township does a number of things, but one of the things it does is it really and truly helps write the regulations that it brings to the Board of Commissioners. And we look at other townships and other similar communities and say, what have they done? What have they done that's been challenged in court, and what has been approved? And what has survived the challenges? And then when we write our new regs, we try to write our regs so that we're not going to end up in court all the time, because we just don't want to do that. And we do that very hard as a hard-on kind of concept. And Angelo has been one of the key people for doing that. And so I'll also tell you that it is the Planning Commission, as opposed to the Zoning Commission, that is going to be working with the township commissioners to approve this. So if you want to do this, that's one. Finally, the next thing I want to say is that it's a dumb thing, but I don't know how everything else is going to turn out, but when I think that you all are really doing something that's really kind of interesting, and I'm excited, but I am not going to have the people in that part of Haverford Township have the same kinds of problems I have in my community in the 5th Ward, because I don't want them to be so unhappy as we are, because I've got everything from places where they're fixing automobiles to doing this to doing that, when it was all residential when I was growing up. And I'm 70 years old, and the house that I live in, that I lived in for almost all of my life, is the same house that I came home to when I was a baby. So I got to tell you, that's my position. And I also have to say that I've never run into 3 more committed, nice people who are really want to do something, but you have to work with the community, and that community around you is the most important part of what you're doing. And because you got kids walking home from school a couple blocks away, just whatever you do, if you ever get the permission to do all of this and you work on that area where kids could play, keep it open. You can have trees over the top, but keep it open where nobody can cut them off at the knees. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm done, Angelo. I'm sorry.
Angelo, you're muted.
Where you go? All right.
Angelo?
I think I was muted too. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Okay, Jesse, I said, let me go first and then you can go last, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I was gonna say Chuck's hard to act to follow, so go ahead. Yeah.
I'm looking at your rendering and I think it's misleading. Okay, the reason I say that is, you look at the site plan, there's obviously parking spaces right behind the monuments there. There isn't parallel parking against the building. It's perpendicular parking, which is going to line up behind the monument. So I think to present a plan that more accurately represents, or a rendering that more accurately represents the site plan, you need to make that adjustment to go to the zoning board. The other thing I want you to be aware of, and I don't know if you even thought of this, is the township does have a requirement that for land developments in the commercial district that are over an acre in size, that 25% of the land has to be reserved for open space. And I don't know if you've evaluated your site plan to see what impacts that would have on the size of your development if the board of commissioners were to decide that they want 25% open space. In addition, there's a section in our zoning code, section 182-715, that talks about conformity of building setback lines. And basically what it says is you have to measure the setbacks on all buildings within 300 feet on either side of your building. And then whatever the median setback is, that sets the setback for your development. So you're showing a building that's right at a 20-foot setback line, whereas the median setback might be 30 feet. Have you evaluated your site plan in regards to those requirements? I think it would be unfair to go to the zoning board and ask them for a certain amount of relief and say that's the absolute minimum relief you need, when it turns out you may end up having to build a smaller building anyhow. So you need to do those studies to determine whether or not this building is actually going to be 27,000 square feet. I guess that leads to my question, why do you need such a large building? Why can't the building be 25,000 square feet? Why can't it be 20,000 square feet? I mean, you have to justify a hardship in order to get a building coverage higher than 25%. And you have to be able to say to the zoning board, you know, this is the absolute minimum we need. Anybody?
Yeah, well, Mr. Capuzzi, let me go back to in terms of the building setbacks. You know, we will certainly take a look at that section and make sure that our setbacks conform to that. I think I can say I have been out to the site as recently as today, and looking, when you're talking about you mentioned the front setback. When you go towards Westchester Pike and you have the strip center there, I'm very confident to say that that is actually closer to the street. It's right off the sidewalk than what our proposed setback would be. And the adjacent building, I think is about the same, the medical, mobile medical testing building. So, but we'll certainly take a look at that. In terms of the size, obviously, you know, the self-storage, you look to see what's practical and reasonable, and you know, what do you need to do in order to make the use work from an economic standpoint, and from to utilize the property that's there for its highest and best use. Mr. Lingo had described earlier that, and Mr. Lambert described that because of the use, you know, we take away from the building, you would add in the parking for the other types of uses that are there. So you're going to end up with the same impervious coverage. We are about 13.5% less impervious coverage than what is permitted, 65% instead of 75%. So, and I think that touches on your notation that we need to keep 25% in reserve for open space.
But you can't trade impervious coverage for building coverage, John. You know that. And you also can't use economics as a reason for your hardship as far as the building coverage. But that's something that you have to discuss with the zoning board and convince them that there is a hardship there. I have a couple questions for Mr. Lambert. Rob?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Have you surveyed this property yet?
We have not.
You have not. So all your calculations are based upon what?
We took the deed description and used aerials to approximate the areas.
So your calculation as far as the lot area and your percentages of building coverage and
Are approximate.
are approximate.
Correct.
All right. So will you have a property survey done before you go to the zoning board? Will you have accurate information to present to the zoning hearing board?
We have not started a survey at this point yet.
That's fine. Will you have a survey done before you go to the zoning board?
Possibly, but we have not proposed to do that yet.
Okay, well, I would be concerned as a resident, as a member of the planning commission, if you were to present information to the zoning board, which may or may not be accurate. As a surveyor and engineer, I think you have a responsibility to make sure that the information you present to them in testimony is true and accurate. As far as you mentioned that you wanted to meet with the neighborhood before the zoning hearing board meeting.
Correct.
Okay, I think in this climate, I think that's going to be difficult to do. You're going to ask people to come out, and you have all the issues with social spacing and all that good stuff that you have to deal with. I don't know how well you can do that and expect people to come out. Although I think it's an important step, I just think it's another hurdle that you're going to have to deal with. As far as the comprehensive plan, we did send out a questionnaire to the citizens, and we did get a very decent response as far as what the citizens thought the township needed. And I don't remember anybody saying anything about self-storage facilities. Okay, so from a comprehensive plan standpoint, I don't think that issue is going to come up from the citizens themselves. One other thing, in regards to the study that Traffic Planning and Design did, the traffic study they prepared, their analysis is based upon a 27,000 square foot facility. Shouldn't it be based on a 80,000 square foot facility?
Yes, Guy has to update that. He misunderstood the dimension.
Okay, so the information you present here is probably going to triple what you've already shown.
Approximately, yes.
Yeah, okay. And that information, that report will be updated before the zoning hearing board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any dates scheduled for the zoning hearing board meeting?
I do not believe so, no.
No, okay. All right.
Mr. McBlain, what do you think? Do you have a date?
We do not. I've talked to Ms. Kirk. I know that because of the coronavirus situation, the zoning hearing board has suspended in-person meetings. I know they were trying to get off the ground, perhaps an Act 15 electronic meeting like this. And I know as we're transitioning back to the yellow to green, the potential exists for in-person meetings again. So I'll defer to Ms. Kirk. But we have spoken several times regarding the scheduling of the meeting, and we have, as requested by the zoning board at the outset of the coronavirus, because I think we came in and applied the Friday that Governor Wolf was closing everything down. So we did execute a waiver of the MPC time requirements. And when I discussed with Ms. Kirk the scheduling of it, we thought perhaps it is best to take advantage of this time and go to the zoning hearing board. There's a lot of, to the planning commission. As you see, this is a conceptual sketch that was presented to you. We have not we will certainly, if we're successful with the zoning hearing board, we will be back before you with preliminary and then final land development plans. Many of these questions will be addressed with more specificity and particularities there. Mr. Capuzzi makes great points in regards to the information that's there, but we certainly take that on our own peril that if we go to the zoning board and get approvals for something and the calculations are not correct, your engineer and you, the members of the commission, are going to point that out. It wouldn't do us much good to, get the zoning relief that doesn't match up to what the actual plans would be. So we're conscious of that.
But my concern to you, sir, and just to let you know, and just to back up Mr. Capuzzi, is I want to let you know that it's really critically important that you understand that the zoning commission will probably not, I can't say it will, but I'm going to say that the zoning commission will not, in the past, over the last 10 to 15 years, has not acted contra to the planning commission except 3 times. And all 3 times that they did it, they lived to rue it. So one of the things that's happened is that we work better together, which is why we really wanted to talk to you first. And I'm glad and I'm excited about the fact that you all came and talked to us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I have to tell you that Mr. Capuzzi has more information in his little finger than I have in my whole body. Okay, he is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck, okay.
Awesome.
Let's move on to Mr. Point. He has some correspondence that he'd like to read to you after he asks you his questions. Jesse?
I'm sorry, but Mr. Capuzzi, can I ask one question too, please? So in terms of the comprehensive survey that was filled out, was there a direct inquiry in regards to storage, or is it just people who fit into just storage? 'Cause unless
No,
you're
it's a
standing in
general
the-
questionnaire, you ask certain questions, what do you think the township needs, and, things like that.
Sure.
And people respond.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, but unless you're standing in your garage or in your attic, filling out that questionnaire, storage probably doesn't come to mind. But if you are there, that's when it becomes a situation.
True. But if it's important to you, you would put it down, I would think also. Depends on your state of mind at the time you're filling out the questionnaire, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jesse, where are you? There you are. Go ahead.
Hi, Eric. Okay, so I will try to be brief since we do have, we did get quite the public outpouring of comments. So I just had a couple quick questions, and I've definitely been torn on this this project since I first saw it, and I definitely appreciate Ms. Dobbs's comments because it helped put a lot of my thoughts together. And then as far as can this be a better, higher, best use of the site by having perhaps a destination and a mixed use. I really like that idea as a compromise. But to follow up on the general size of the building, which I think, tends to be everybody's main concern of this project, have you guys considered, going down and using a basement level to help reduce the overall size of the building?
Our thoughts were to just have it significantly lower than what the zoning classification allowed. And we were gonna, our thought was try to match this kind of the scale along the street there, where you have some taller 3-story stuff. So to answer your question, we have not thought about underground storage.
Okay, looked like my feed cut out a little bit, but that's all right. Okay, so it's definitely something I think to consider. And also just as far as the future, use of the building, I think I definitely like the idea of a mixed use and, the possibility of making this building as flexible as possible for the future. Like, can it be designed so that it could be adapted from storage to offices or apartments or other shopping or other uses in the future? To Chuck's point, as if we were to allow something it's not allowed now, but there might be a change 20 years from now. How can we not be stuck with a building that's not flexible? Something else to think about. I went and walked the site today because I don't think I'd ever gotten out of my car at that I haven't shopped at that shopping center before, but I think that the building, the general massing of the building, I think is actually appropriate with all the apartment buildings around there. I don't think that that's too much problem. I mean, the general appearance of it, I actually I do like the rendering, and if it's adhered to, I think it could be quite a handsome building, as long as it can be a mixed use project. And I would love the idea of the parklet and the open space, reviewing that. I think if we can get the overall size of the building down and allow for more of the open space and a destination use, I think that could be much better. I noted one thing on the plan. I think the back plan says something about assumed residential use, but it actually appears to be a large parking lot with trailers and things back there. So I don't know who owns that property or what that use is. If that's something that we should also be looking at, separate from this project, but what's going on back there, I had kind of questions.
To the rear of the property, Mr. Boynton?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the medical. They are mobile health testing and supplies. So they've got those. So they're built. Their property is like an L, or a backwards L. Starts out on Eagle Road, comes back and makes a left-hand turn. So they've got a couple different industrial buildings back there and some very large trailers for tractor trailers for transportation. So that's what I think you see immediately behind to the rear of the property.
Jesse, they went in there in the 1970s.
Okay.
And it's zoned residential.
Yeah, they were.
Oh, is it really zoned residential?
It's zoned R6.
Yes.
Right, because that was when I saw people in the news talking about trucks back there, I was like, I have to see this for myself. And, you know, but when you're standing back there, I mean, there's quite, and another question I have is the, I know we need a buffer zone, but there already is a really you know, a dense vegetation zone in the back, so that when you can't really see through the back of the, you know, from the back of the existing funeral to even to that truck area, and certainly not from the residential street behind. I went and drove down that residential street, and all you can see are those trucks. So I would definitely suggest keeping that.
I think the trucks are more visible from the residential street. At the rear of the Logan obviously, you know, for the people visiting the funeral home, many years ago, it looks like they planted arborvitaes that have grown 20 feet high, that are dense. I agree with you.
Right.
If you stand in the parking lot of Logan Funeral Home, you don't see the trucks, but you do see it from the residential street behind.
And they're parked on grass too, by the way, which is against the law, most probably.
Will that dense vegetation remain? Is that the plan? Would you reuse that as the buffer?
I haven't gotten to that level of detail, but I would expect, I think it's right near the property lines. I would expect a lot of that to remain.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great because, I mean, obviously waiting for something new to grow in is, you know, it's obviously going to take a lot longer. So I would highly recommend.
That's a no-brainer. The answer's going to be yes.
Right. So, okay. Yeah. I mean, I echo all the other comments. I think, and you know, the main thing being is, you know, if we can, you know, find a way to make this building, you know, somewhat smaller in footprint and more of a destination use and a mixed use on the first floor, because, you know, certainly I don't see how anybody, you know, or, you know, me included, can be excited about only a self-storage unit as being the highest and best use of this site. I think we can certainly do better by the residents of the township. And speaking of our fine residents, Kelly, would you like to queue up the public comments here, and then I'll certainly help read them?
Sure. So as many of you know, we had quite a bit of public participation for this item on the agenda. I think at final count, let me go back. We were at approximately 166 emails in opposition of the proposed plan. So what we're going to do, or what I would like to do, if everybody is in agreement, is read off a number of those with, you know, a range of different opinions and ideas and thoughts about the plan, and then we will have a list of all, or actually I believe that we are going to list all of the people who did write in and their address, and provide all of the comments on our website probably tomorrow. Get them together because there's a lot. There was one other comment that was more neutral, so 167 altogether. Jesse, if you want to, you know, read the samples.
Yeah, yep, sure thing, Kelly. All right, so our first public comment is from Lisa and Mike Bericki, 519 Central Avenue. Sending this email to voice my concerns of having a storage unit built in place of Logan Funeral Home on Eagle Road. I moved here with my husband 8 years ago, and we are currently raising our 2 children here. We both loved Haverford Town because of its greenery and suburban feel, while still being a short drive to the city. We never wanted to live in the city, and a huge storage unit not far from another huge storage unit further down Eagle Road is making us feel like we live in an industrial park. This is a great town to live in, but these changes are starting to make us second guess our choice. Please do not allow plans to go through for another all-caps storage unit. Our next letter is from Jeffrey A. Beer, Esquire of 14 Glen Terrace. Dear Ms. Kirk, I write to urge you to advise the Planning Commission that my wife Nicole and I oppose the current proposal to build a storage facility on the property previously owned by the Logan Funeral Home. As a member of this community and a real estate broker, I say with confidence that converting the site to such industrial use would not only detract from the beauty of our surrounding residential community, but also negatively impact our property values. This would be particularly disappointing in light of this year's county-wide reassessment, which of course would not have taken into account such impactful development in our newly proposed assessed values. This is simply not an appropriate location for such a property/business. It's less than a half mile from our local elementary school. Thank you in advance for your consideration. Okay, now I'm going to take a drink for this next one. It's a page and a half long. This is from Christy F. Friedman and Samuel E. Friedman, Esquire, of 301 Greenbrier Lane. Dear Haverford Township Planning Commission, I am writing to you as a Havertown homeowner who opposes the current proposed plan for Blue Devil Realty to build a self-storage facility at 57 South Eagle Road in Havertown, where the Logan Funeral Home currently sits. As you may be aware, there has been no shortage of recent discussions about this proposal by Havertown residents on social media. Sean Knapp has identified himself on social media as an equitable owner of the Eagle Road location, and along with his partner is the applicant for the proposed self-storage facility. The information provided to residents via social media to date by Mr. Knapp has been limited to 2 sketches, the promise of a beautiful building and the installation of stormwater facilities to control the flow of stormwater leaving the site. That is wholly inadequate. While I am appreciative of the artist rendering he shared with us to provide an idea of what he is planning for the design of the building, those photos are limited to one viewpoint of the building and they completely fail to illustrate scale. Architectural drawings from all angles would visually help concerned residents to view the proposed structure all around and side by side in relation to surrounding buildings, as opposed to visualizing the scale ourselves. Given that Mr. Knapp is an applicant appearing before the Planning Commission with his proposal, he should be more than prepared to explain why the proposal is being made, to provide an abundance of supporting architectural photos, details, and documentation, and to explain exactly what benefits his business will bring to our community. From what I have seen, he has failed to do that. Based upon the limited drawings that Mr. Knapp has provided, I take no issue with the design of the building. It is tasteful. However, the numbers in the proposal indicate that this building will be huge and comparable in size, lot size versus building size, to the Mr. Storage facility on the other end of Eagle Road. No matter how nice Mr. Knapp's design is, his plans to put a 327,000 square foot building on a 51,800 square foot lot is enormous. While it may not be an eyesore from a design perspective, it will be an eyesore from a size perspective. It does not matter how nice the building design is if it ends up looking like he dropped a stadium on a postage stamp. When I asked Mr. Knapp whether there was a way to have the building be more right-sized for the lot, he did not respond. I believe the reason he did not respond is because he does not want to admit that reducing the size of the space will reduce his profit, which he does not want. We need to be mindful of the face that over-commercialization of residential areas can destroy the character of neighborhoods and towns like Havertown. Obviously, I understand that this lot is already zoned for commercial use, so that point is moot. However, my concern is that once you allow for one behemoth, it opens the door for others. Storage facilities like the one being proposed are gigantic. There is a reason they are typically located in industrial parks, commercial districts, and urban environments, and not residential neighborhoods. Despite Mr. Knapp's assertion and reminders that he is a fellow Havertown resident, this proposal is not about what's best for Havertown. His motivations are financially driven, and it is important for us not to confuse the two. This is a lucrative investment opportunity. Storage facilities as an alternative asset class have high profit potential for multiple reasons. This investment does well no matter what the economy looks like. We cannot put the aspirations above the valid concerns of Havertown residents who have every right to be concerned that Mr. Knapp's investment opportunity may cause the landscape of our community to change and our property values to plummet. I respectfully request the Planning Commission reject Blue Devil Realty's proposal as it currently stands. If this business proposal is really about what's best for Havertown, then Mr. Knapp should be comfortable with the Planning Commission rejecting his request to allow the structure of this size to be placed in its lot, and he should be amenable to working together to find a better solution for this space. Take a drink. That's the longest one. The rest are more like 2 sentences. The next one is from Joe Knorr, 1135 Bon Air Road. Hello, my name is Joe. I just read his name. I am writing to formally object to the proposed storage facility being considered on current Logan Funeral Home site on Eagle Road. We do not need another storage facility, especially in light of the current eyesore across from the YMCA being approved for an expansion. Please listen to your residents and do your part to make our town more desirable and less like a giant industrial park. The next one comes from...
With this one too, I'm sorry. I just got a text from Joe. He apologized. He does support this now, per the last thing I got. There's several people, it was the same thing. I'm not sure when Joe sent that email.
That was sent June 9th at 12:51 a.m.
Yeah, I talked to him. I actually received a Facebook message from him today. But that's not the case. To include Ashley Spitz and several other neighbors that were just circulating petitions. But whatever, I have 80 different things. We kind of back that up as well.
Well, sure, and obviously you've presented a lot more information tonight, so you've addressed some of the concerns here, of course. The next one comes from Ian McClements of 648 Grand Avenue. Greetings, well, that's his name. Okay. I am writing to formally object to the planned storage facility taking the place of Logan Funeral Home on Eagle Road. In a town such as Haverford Town, with home storage usually abundant, another large, anonymous, ugly building facility is the last thing we need. It would do nothing more than emphasize material wealth and waste on behalf of both the township and individuals who patronize the intended storage business. I ask the Planning Commission to consider the integrity and charm of our town rather than allow any and all business development at any cost. The next one comes from Charmaine Newman, 1901 Westchester Pike. She gives an apartment number. Please do not allow another storage unit in the township. The property land can be used in a more productive way, like a child care center, to satisfy the need for before and after care in the township. It can be used as a multi-purpose resource center to support our community's struggling families and seniors. We just don't need another place for people to store stuff that will sit for years collecting dust. Thank you. The next one comes from Marlena Severini of 507 Howell Lane. We do not, I assume she means, do not need another storage unit facility. We already have 2 in the town. One you don't even notice on Westchester Pike, and the other monstrosity on Eagle. Although not much else could go there since it was the Superfund site, this area doesn't need another facility. Next one is short and sweet from Sean Teague at 117 Mill Road. Please let this email represent that I am opposed to a storage facility in the residential Manoa neighborhood. The next one comes from Paula Yeager, 1439 Ashton Road, Ward 1. I am writing to express my concern about the proposed storage facility for the former Logan Funeral Home property on Eagle Road. I do not think that Haverford Town needs another storage facility. There are so many other things that we need as community that could be put into that space. A new library, a community center, literally anything but another storage facility. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. And I believe, okay, this is the last of our that we're going to read tonight. This comes from Meg Clark, 205 Mill Road. I usually feel strongly that a commercial space be used for something that benefits community spirit. I would have liked to see the storage facility across from the Y, a climbing gym or something like that. That said, this new storage store proposed to replace a funeral home doesn't get foot traffic. I also think the design is pretty, so I'm not opposed. However, why not make it eco-friendly? Solar panels, rain garden to control parking lot runoff, LED lights. There are many building options that make it more friendly to the environment and to the community. So and as Kelly mentioned, we have I read 10. So there's about 155 or 56 other comments that we received.
Anything else you want to say, Jesse, or you talked out for now?
I'm parched.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't ask our township engineer to express any comments or questions he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Capuzzi. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the obvious one, which is the impervious coverage. This is in a watershed that has chronic flooding problems, documented flooding problems, and any increase in impervious is a concern for that. So, you know, regardless of how this proceeds and what the size of the building is, certainly make sure the applicant is well aware of that and takes into account all the stormwater management controls and possibly more if that's possible to do on that lot. So that is the biggest concern of my point right now.
Chuck, isn't it true that since this is all basically new impervious, everything that's out there is going to be demolished, rebuilt, it's considered
replacement,
has to be dealt with in some manner, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I think Mr. Lambert will aware of that, and you know, that certainly, if we get approvals from the zoning hearing board and are back before you with preliminary land development plans, that stormwater management will have to be addressed. We still are under the permitted. The proposal would be to under the permitted impervious coverage, but we recognize, if you look at the other uses around it, particularly the retail uses adjoining to the north, they're 100% impervious coverage. So we're aware of that.
Okay, I think we've gone through this pretty completely, as much as we can, based upon the information we have. And it being a sketch plan, that we don't have any need to approve anything or recommend approval. And just for those who might be listening, the general public, I just want to point out that the Planning Commission is responsible for making recommendations. We don't recommend approvals, but we don't grant approval. So ultimate approval authority rests with the zoning board as far as the variances and the use, and with the Board of Commissioners as far as land development, things like that.
That's right.
We only make recommendations, and we take into account all the feedback we get from the residents, from the applicant, from the township engineer. And we base our recommendations based upon that input. So I just wanted to make that clear. What we will be doing, though, is we probably will be writing a letter to the zoning board for their consideration when they do end up reviewing your application, John, okay? We need to do some homework amongst ourselves before we can write that letter. We just want to make sure we have a consensus on everything that everybody has a concern with and everybody agrees with. So we can't write that letter tomorrow, but we'll give it some thought and hopefully get it put together within the next week or so. Definitely before you meet with the zoning board.
Thank you, Mr. Capuzzi. And if I could just, sort of wrap up and just make a couple of final comments. We want to thank the Planning Commission for their attention to it. From the very beginning, Greg and Sean have wanted to be very open about this project. Sean himself went out and canvassed much of the neighborhood, still is obtaining petition signatures in favor and wanted to discuss it. And I think, as you've seen, he's made contact with many members of the community. We're well aware that in the last couple of days, social media has noted this project. And social media is great sometimes and not great other times. But we very much appreciate everybody's input. As Greg said earlier, it's our hope, and we recognize the difficulties now with the restrictions on public gatherings. But when the public input started coming in on social media, that was the suggestion by Greg and Sean, was to organize some sort of a meeting with the residents and with the neighbors. They want to be as open as possible. They want to listen to ideas to improve the project, like we've heard many this evening. And they want to take those into consideration and go to the zoning hearing board, and ultimately, hopefully come back before the Planning Commission and address all the very technical issues that are raised. And
if I can add something, we, in the past, when we were working on putting together the Quarry Center, we used and I don't know if it's available because it has to do with the school district, but when the school is out of session, you all would like to meet over at Manoa School with the people in the community, you might be able to set up something with the school district, because I don't know, and you might be able to sit down with the community and talk to them. And whatever works out best for that community is the way I, as an individual, am inclined to lean, because it's their part. We have like all these different parts. We have Haverford, Drexel Hill, this place, that place, everywhere else. Haverford Township is huge. In one regard, it's got so many communities, Manoa and Lanark and this and that. Everybody has, they have a center of where their community is. And what is most important in Haverford Township is that we look after those communities. So I'm over talking tonight and I apologize, but I am telling you, you made some points tonight, but you didn't make all the points you need to make. And if you don't make them before you go before the zoning commission, it's not going to fly. That's my honest to God answer. It's not going to fly. So you guys need to figure out how to work with the community. And it's that local community you got to work with. Sorry. Angelo, I apologize. Open my mouth. Sorry.
You don't have to apologize, Chuck. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight, and I appreciate the information that you provided us. I think we gave you a lot of feedback that hopefully you'll take to heart and adjust your plan accordingly if possible. And next move is to meet with the zoning board.
God bless you. And stay safe.
Very much.
Thank you. We have a little bit more business to do.
Oh, yes, we do. I can't leave. I'm sorry. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
The last item on tonight's agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 14th meeting, May 14th, 2020, which was dealt with primarily the Haverford Township School District and the additions to the high school. Does anyone care to make a motion in regards to those minutes?
I agree. I make a motion that we accept them.
Is there a second?
I second. I'll second that.
Second, Rob seconded. Anybody have any comments, questions? No? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that was unanimous. And all opposed, no. Right, okay. All right, that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do we have to set our next meeting?
Wait a minute. Before we go, Kelly,
Yes,
can you help draft a letter for us to the zoning hearing board?
yes, I can.
Okay, you got all the good points that all the commission members made?
I have a whole lot of points written down, but I'm sure I will be contacting at least a few of you just for clarification before I send everything out.
What I'd like you to do is do a draft, okay? And then circulate it to all the members.
Sure.
And then we'll all take a shot at it, and hopefully we'll come to a consensus. After we get all our comments in, we'll send one more draft around, make sure everybody's comfortable with it. And we'll send it out to the zoning board, and we'll copy the applicant.
Sounds good. Great.
And Kelly, it's great to see you again.
Oh, it's great to see everybody. I haven't seen everybody.
Yeah, I picked up my stuff today, and they said, "Oh, she left it right out here for you a minute ago." So it was nice to have. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
Okay.
I'll also distribute my notes too that I took tonight.
That would be great. Thank you.
Please, it'd be nice.
Okay.
It's good to see everyone also.
Before everybody,
For the 25th?
I was just going to say, before everybody signs off, our next meeting would be scheduled for the 25th. As of right now, I don't have any agenda items. I don't know that Greenbrier will be back
I don't think so.
by that point. It sounds like they still have a lot of the stormwater management to do. So
Those steep slopes are going to be a problem.
I would imagine that we won't see them back until July 9th at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Kelly,
only
did
have
we
one
receive
meeting
the
in July,
review
right?
letter?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, did we receive the review letter from the county for that project yet?
No, I have a receipt from the county, but not a review.
Okay.
Actually, I think they're meeting next week.
And Maggie, thank you for those comments. They were amazing. I'm
great.
serious. It was
Thank you,
so
yeah.
cool.
You nailed it.
You
You nailed it,
really
Maggie.
nailed it.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad we're all in agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. So, excellent. I mean, again, like ideally.
Guys,
well,
it's, we're having a casual conversation, that's fine. I just want to let everyone know that we are still recording and we are still on the air.
That's okay.
I didn't.
Telling you,
Nothing was.
You had a great day. You really nailed it.
Well, as a new member, it's always hard to kind of understand the dynamics that you all have established, and us having only met in person wet once
Once.
before we transitioned. You know, so it's always hard, and I don't want to overstep any bounds. So I'm glad you all appreciate my comments, and I'm just glad to be able to be on the commission and help provide my expertise to it. So I'm glad to be here, and again, it's good to see you all, and just looking forward to working on more projects with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, May.
All right, everyone, we'll be in touch.
You have to make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yes, I thought you did that, I'm sorry.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who said second?
I did.
Jesse seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
And John, it was a pleasure meeting you. I have never met you before. It was a lovely evening tonight.